Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, good evening, depending on where you are based. And thank you all for attending this first webinar of the second series of webinars organized by GI WACAF and dedicated to oil spill preparedness and response. I hope you can all hear me correctly and you can see my screen. First of all, I would like to give some technical details for the participants. So you have on your screen a chat room where you can ask questions that we will try to answer at the end of the webinar during a Q&A session. Above where you type your message, you will find documents and PDF presentations that will be available for download at the end of each presentation. If you're having connection or internet problems, you can reconnect to the webinar by clicking on the red button Reconnect at the top of your screen. So after a first series of webinars organized last year on the main principles and general framework of oil spill preparedness and response, you can find all the videos in replay on our website. This second series will focus on slightly more specific and technical subjects, while we hope remaining accessible to a broader audience. The format has also changed a little bit. It will be a 1-hour session, and it will be a little more interactive, at least we hope so, with the use of polls. But first, for those of who did not attend the first series of webinars and who may be not familiar with GI WACAF, I will first give a very brief introduction to the project before then introducing today's webinar and the speakers. So the GI WACAF project, GI WACAF stands for Global Initiative for West, Central and Southern Africa. This project was established in 2006 as part of a broader joint initiative between the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, and IPICA, the Global Oil and Gas Industry Association for Advancing Environmental and Social Performance. And this broader initiative is called the Global Initiative. And the aim is to promote cooperation between governments and industry in the spirit of the OPERA C90 Convention, that is the International Convention on Oil Pollution, Preparedness, Response and Cooperation. And this convention is key for oil spill preparedness and response. And you will have heard of this convention if you attended last year's webinars. And in the framework of this convention, GI WACAF focuses on the Atlantic coast of Africa, as you can see on the map on the screen, and covers 22 countries. So the main objective is to strengthen the capacity of the 22 partner countries to prepare for and respond to oil spills, and to enable them to better protect their marine and coastal environments. To this end, we are implementing technical assistance activities, and these activities can range from workshops, training on technical or legal matters, or tabletop or deployment exercise. So on this slide, you can see in a nutshell how GI WACAF works. You can read this visual representation starting from the top and clockwise. So as I said, GI WACAF is a joint endeavor between IMO and IPICA, so between public and private sectors to manage oil spill risks and mitigate associated impacts. It supports 22 African partner countries in the development and implementation of sub-regional and national oil spill preparedness and response systems. And today, this webinar is dedicated to a document, a national oil spill contingency plan, that is the cornerstone of the national oil spill preparedness and response system. So, to do so, the GI WACAF maintains a constant liaison with partner countries through a network of focal points based in every country to provide tailored capacity building activities to the countries, which can be workshops, training course or exercises. We encourage better communication and collaboration between governments and the industry in each country. And we encourage partner countries to ratify and implement international conventions especially the OPRC convention, as I said, but also liability and compensation conventions, for instance. So if you're here today, it's for the second series of webinars. So building on the first season, which ran from June to December 2020 and covered the main principle and general framework of oil spill preparedness and response. This new series, organized by GI WACAF, will cover more specific topics related to oil spill preparedness and response, but also suited for broader audience. As I already said, but maybe not of you were connected, the format has changed a little bit. It will be a 1-hour session, and we will use quizzes or polls to make it a little bit more interactive. And today is the first webinar in the series that is dedicated to National Oil Spill Contingency Plan and its annexes. The objective of the webinar today is for you to build lessons, build on lessons learned during the first series, especially webinar 3, which was dedicated to the main tools used in contingency planning, such as the National Oil Spill Contingency Plans. And here today, it's really to gain an understanding of the development process of NOSCP, including its scope, stakeholder, risk assessment, and institutional environment, and to gain knowledge on the content, including the annexes, and especially the importance of its effective implementation. So for that, we have with us today 2 experts from OTRA and ITOPF, who will deliver each a 15 minutes presentation followed by quiz. And at the end of the webinar, they will answer your question in a dedicated Q&A session. So first, for the first presentation, we have Lindsay Page-Jones, Technical Advisor at OTRA, that you can see here, and who will present the development process and update of NOSCP. And then for the second presentation, we have Andrew Lemazurier from ITOPF, who represent the practical aspects of the NOSCP, the annexes, and the importance of the effective implementation. So you can find a more detailed program in the documents to be downloaded. So as I said, the documents, you can find them above the section where you type in your message in the chat. They are put here by my colleague, Chloé Gondo, whom you cannot see today, but he's in charge of the technical problem in the background. So thank you, Chloé. And finally, you can find more information about GI WACAF and our activities in the brochure to download, but also on our website or LinkedIn page. And I give now the floor to Lindsay Page-Jones from OTRA for the first presentation. Thank you. Lindsay, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for attending. I hope you can all see the slides. We will start. Perfect, thank you. We'll start this webinar with a discussion on the national contingency plans and development or update process. So I'm Lindsay Page-Jones. I work for a small consultancy company named OTRA, and we provide support to authorities and also private sector for contingency planning and preparedness activities such as training and exercises, but also we also provide assistance during real spills. And we have been involved in with the GI WACAF since its inception, and are also currently working with the industry in the region, in the WACAF region. So this presentation will give an overview of the status of the national plans in the WACAF region. We'll discuss also the typical content of a contingency plan, discuss response resources and management organization, and development or update of the plan and how to set up the response system. So when we speak of a national response system, we differentiate between the response system and the plan. So the system is the combination of regulations, organizations, personnel, procedures, facility, equipment, etc., that can be mobilized to respond to a spill and limit its effect. And the national plan or contingency plan or national oil spill contingency plan is the document describing and officializing that response system. It will also give or describe how the conventions, like the OPRC convention, and also the Abidjan Convention and its emergency protocol for the WACAF area, are implemented in the national regulation. And it provides a framework or an umbrella for all the other local and sectorial contingency plans that should be developed in country. Alors, we'll probably use here the term national contingency plan, as the hazardous and noxious substances can be considered in addition to oil. So if we have a quick look at the status in the WACAF region with the help of the maps maintained by the GI WACAF project, we can see here on this map that nearly all countries in the area have a contingency plan in place, in force in their country. Of course, that doesn't reflect the operational capabilities in place also in the countries. However, also various items that can be integrated or at least linked to the national plan are still in development in the region. Like here, the integration of the provisions of the OPRC 90 convention, or the setup of emergency management systems. So orange and red color highlight countries where the work is in progress. And there are also items in development like waste management plan or shoreline cleanup specific plans. So the ratification and implementation of the convention is of course critical, but this subject requires a whole presentation of itself, and we have chosen here to focus more on resources, organization, and development steps of the contingency plan. So regarding the content of a national plan, there are no international standards, but of course some items could not be missed. And the OPRC 90 convention and the OPRC HNS protocol identifies some items that have to be included in a national plan. So usually the first chapters here will define, of course, the scope of the plan. Does it address oil spill or oil and HNS also incidents? His geographic coverage, and it will remind the applicable regulation in country, the conventions signed, either international conventions or regional convention. And it will also remind the national competent authorities for alert, for preparedness, for response, and for the request or provision of assistance. The next chapters usually focus on describing the environment, the risks of spill, their effects, fate of behavior of the product, and the applicable response strategies. Here, some more precise items can be included, like the national policy for the use of dispersant or, for example, site protection plans. Here, usually also, the requirements for the minimum resources to be maintained by the different players in country are defined here. So another key part of the plan here will describe the organization set up in the country and the mechanism to manage a spill. So such as the alert focal points, the national response and command coordination system, the communication network, for example. And the plan is completed with chapters describing the preparedness activities, such as requirements for training and exercise, and a set of appendices or supporting documents like forms, inventories of equipment, sensitivity maps, list of contacts. So that will be discussed in the next presentation. So regarding tactics and resources, we don't have time here, of course, to discuss the whole process to identify and dimension response resources, but some principles are reminded here. So first of all, when we speak of resources, we speak about the personnel and the equipment and the logistic support, such as vessels or helicopters, for example. Booms and skimmers alone will not be very useful without the competent crew and operators, without offshore vessels, and without aerial guidance to bring them onto the slicks at sea. Also, it is not responsible for a country to maintain huge stockpiles of equipment to manage all spills up to the worst scenarios. So assistance is really a key principle. So the idea for authorities is that they must ensure that response is possible, immediately or nearly immediately or as soon as possible in the country, and also that response operations can escalate quite quickly for larger spills. So for local entities, such as ports or oil terminals, the authorities here must usually ensure that they have sufficient resources on site to manage the minor spills, which are the most probable ones, but also have enough resources, equipment on site to sustain the response until the arrival of further assistance, if it is needed, of course. So contracts and agreements should be in place also to be for those local entities to mobilize assistance. So here, industry uses usually the concept of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 to characterize the level of an incident and the type of response resources sometimes. So that's a useful concept, not always directly applicable for national authorities. At the national level, the authorities there must ensure that the intervention is possible on all the areas at risk in the country, so even in remote locations or in difficult access areas. So they should also, and that will be discussed also in the next presentation, they should also set up some inventory of the resources available in countries and discuss or set up arrangements to access the resources of the industry in the country or international assistance. So regarding the national organization, that's really a critical part of a national plan, and it must consider the territorial and administrative organization of the country, as well, of course, as its geography and the risk of spills in the country. So in every country, we can find different levels of organization, for example, municipalities, then districts or regions or provinces with competent authorities at each level. Other countries, such as Nigeria, for example, have a federal organization with a different setup. So an example is proposed here to discuss the various levels of incident management to consider. So at the local level, the authority may be here. The local authority may be the mayor or the head of the municipality, or the person in charge of an oil and gas facility, or the person in charge of a port. And operations will usually be carried out by a local incident commander or someone with a similar responsibilities. For larger spills, an area authority will usually supervise the response. That may be, for example, the governor of a province, or in French-speaking country, le préfet du département. And they will also manage crisis issues, such as public communication or fishing bans, for example. And the response operation and the assistance can be coordinated by an area incident commander. At a national level, here, overall land and at sea response operation and also assistance are usually coordinated by a national incident commander and his team. Above, a competent minister or sometime an interministerial committee will mobilize the whole response and manage high-level crisis issues such as emergency funds or relations with close country, for example. So this again is just an example. Each organization is adapted to the specifics of a country. But what is found or should be found in every country is those different levels, local, area, national, regional, and international. So of course, the responsible party has also to be considered. So again, this next figure is just an example for our discussion. So in case of a large spill from a facility of the oil and gas industry, for example, they will mobilize teams at sea and equipment or on land if needed. At the head office of the company, there will be sort of country incident commander that will coordinate the overall response, and probably the top management of the company will manage crisis related issues. So here the industry uses the incident command system, which is a robust system, and some provisions of that system may be useful at a national level, but it may not cover all the needs for national authorities. So at the same time, the national plan may be activated, and the national organization mobilized, but here probably more to supervise and facilitate the overall operation. So there must be coordination mechanisms between the authority and the responsible party at all levels, as outlined here, but by those gray arrows. So those interfaces should be identified and discussed and included in the contingency plan, and if possible, tested during exercises. So of course, the national organization must also be very flexible so it can be adapted to the spill location, its extent, and the responsible party. The development or the update of a national plan is a very complex process. It will involve many stakeholders, and it will involve also dealing with many issues, legal, social, environmental, operational, financial, institutional, etc. So unfortunately, there is no standardized method for this. So however, lessons learned from a country or the different countries of a region could be better analyzed probably and shared with the other closed countries so that one can benefit from the other. So in all cases, to update or develop a national plan, one national authority or national committee must lead the work with a global approach based, if possible, and it is a best practice, on a logical framework. And an example is provided here with three main steps. First, the assessment and the development or the update of the plan. Then the approval and the enactment of the plan and the development of an implementation document for the response system and the plan. And then the implementation, really activities and work can start. So let's have a look at some activities that can be included here. So the first part usually includes, of course, meetings, workshops, working sessions, and the production of some documents. So first, of course, the framework has to be defined, and it starts, of course, with the scope and the geographical coverage of the plan and national response system that has to be confirmed. A key step is to assess the plan, if there is one in place, and the national system. So different tools exist. It can be simple questions like those proposed here, and some other more elaborated national plan evaluation tools exist, such as RETOS or other methods that are used during some of the GI WACAF workshops. So of course, the regulatory framework of the country has to be reviewed and also quite often updated, for example, to include the provisions of the latest convention ratified by the country. And competent authorities are confirmed and spill scenarios and strategies are studied. So after this, work is carried out in on two main areas. So first of all, the monitoring and the response tactics should be defined and the required resources identified in country to start, either held by or owned by the private sector or the authorities. And at the same time, the organization and the response management mechanism here should be defined, and we've spoken about this in the previous slides. So of course, the two are closely linked. So after this, with the findings of these steps, the plan can be developed, updated, and approved officially. And then it is good practice that the implementation of the plan is defined in an implementation document. And here, some components usually found in an implementation documents are discussed and proposed. Of course, training and exercise here, as well as the purchase of some equipment sometimes, is a key component. So once the plan is approved and the implementation document is also approved, the implementation activities to set up the national response system according to the reviewed plan can start. So a few final words to finish. First, it appears really important that the plan development or update process is managed by the authorities with external support as needed. To have a robust system, the legal foundations of the plan and of the conventions need to be reviewed and updated if needed. The structure to manage the incident in country must be really fine-tuned to be consistent with the different spill origins, responsible parties, and organization of the countries. Responsibilities of teams must be cleared, of course, and coordination mechanism, resources, and access to assistance must be in place in the country. So it is key to really plan the implementation, to have, of course, a budget for the different activities, and there the support of high authorities of the country is critical, as well as some possible external support. And their joint projects with the industry are usually very fruitful. Finally, regular exercises based on realistic scenarios are probably the best way to train the people, to test the system, to have competent and organized personnel, which is one of the main key of an efficient response system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, for this very comprehensive and clear presentation. Now, in order to see, we would like to I will share a poll and publish it. This is linked with Lindsay's presentation. So in order to answer to the poll, you will find it just above the place where you type in your message to the chat. So just in the chat, you can, I hope everybody can see the poll and can answer it. So the question is, are you familiar with the document of the NOSCP of your country? While everybody is answering to the poll, maybe Lindsay, you would like to comment on why we ask this question. Lindsay? I don't know. Have you? Yeah, sorry. No.
yes, it is critical, of course, for all the parties that are going to be involved in either preparedness activities or response during a real case to be familiar with the provisions of the plan in their country. And that can be people from ministries or state agencies, but of course it can also be people from the industry, from the oil and gas industry, shipping industry, port authorities, that must be aware of the provisions of the national plan so that they ensure that their own local plan complies with the national plan.
Thank you very much. And in the meantime, I think people have answered the question. The majority of our participants seem to be familiar with the NOSCP, which is good news. 90% answered yes, while 9 answered no. People are still answering. 91% for familiar with the NOSCP. So I will end here, and the second question, which is, I hope you can all see it. I've just published it. So it's, do you think the national oil spill response system in your country allows to manage efficiently spills at sea and onshore? Yeah, I see people answering. Maybe Lindsay, just a word as well. Well, it's very much linked to the first question as well, but.
Of course it is, yes, so thank you, linked to the first question, but as we reminded in the introduction, the plan is a document which describes a system, but it is not the system. So it's interesting to have the opinion of the participants on the efficiency, not the quality of the document, but rather the efficiency of the system. And it may be different.
Thank you. So I see people still answering, but here the majority, 70% think that the national oil spill response system is efficient, while 30% think no. So I hope this webinar will help improve, or the work of GI WACAF improve this situation. Yeah, I think we are still stable. 28% think that the NOSCP does not manage efficiently the response, while 72% think yes. So thank you very much all for all the participants to have participated in the poll. I will end the poll here, and we will there will be another one at the end of the second presentation. But then I give the floor to Andrew Lemazurier for the second presentation on the annexes of the NOSCP.
Thank you very much, Emily. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today. My name is Andrew Lemazurier, and I'll be presenting on the practical aspects of an NOSCP for you today. So this is just a general outline of how the presentation is structured, with the main topics being contents of the NOSCP annexes, the need for cooperation with others, and then going on to sensitivity mapping and logistics. And I'll touch on a few points that need to be considered in the NOSCP for response strategies, and then discuss waste management, wildlife response, and we'll finish discussing the importance of training and exercise, which Lindsay has sort of spoken about briefly. So just a brief introduction as to the company that I work for. So ITOPF is a not-for-profit scientific advisory organisation providing pollution response activity advice from the shipping industry. The technical services we provide can be divided into two facets. You've got response and preparedness. In the event of a spill, ITOPF attends site or provide remote advice on cleanup operations, and also partake in claims analysis and assessment. And then in peacetime, we advise governments and industry on the preparation of contingency plans and other matters related to marine pollution. We also contribute to work of other organisations, provide seminars and training courses, assist with drills and exercise, and take part in many conferences throughout the world. ITOPF's association with GI WACAF Project spans 11 years, And we've provided multiple workshops, hosted tabletop exercises in the countries that are displayed on the map on the right-hand side. And we also provide comments and assist with countries' contingency plans, as some of you may be aware. Here's just a list of useful information that should be included within the plan's annex. Annexes provide support to the operations and decision-making process through the provision of information and sensitivity maps relevant to the geographical area covered by the plan. The annexes should contain information to enable the readers to rapidly communicate with relevant parties such as government authorities, response organisations, experts, as well as PPE and waste contractors. Response information is also included, such as the location of dispersant restricted zones and boom deployment plans. And then supporting logistical information should be included, such as shoreline types, access routes, and possible waste sites, which I'll discuss further in the presentation. And then finally, financial support information should be included to allow cost recovery and compensation. So cooperation is vital to ensure that there are no overlaps or oversights when it comes to contingency planning. Government authorities, members of the oil industry, and experts need to cooperate during both planning and operational phases of the NOSCP so that each party knows their roles and responsibilities in the event of an incident. A list of oil spill response equipment and availability should be included, as well as non-specialist machinery such as excavators and vacuum trucks that can be used for beach cleaning and things like waste handling operations. As well, compatibility should be sought between the oil industry's plan and the national plan so that the ability to escalate a response is possible from an individual facility to the wider area, if that's necessary. And then to further increase the collaboration between authorities, technical experts, and the oil industry, all representatives should attend any training exercises that have been organised. And finally, and very importantly, for equipment and services owned by the oil industry, clarification of the provision of these resources should be sought, and agreed contractual terms could be appended to the plan so that when an incident occurs, resources can be mobilised rapidly without having to discuss and negotiate rates. The plan should also contain specialist expertise capabilities, such as trajectory modelling, remote sensing, and technical advice. In the event of an incident, trajectory modelling is an important tool to broadly assess the direction of any oil and where it's likely to strand on the shoreline, so that resources can be mobilised to these specific areas. Modelling tools such as WebGNOME and Mothi use forecasted wind and current data to predict these trajectories. Obviously, modelling comes with caveats and it's not entirely accurate, but it gives you a sort of a broad scale as to where the oil might strand. And then satellite imagery can also be used to reveal any irregular features on the sea surface which may be caused by an oil spill. The availability of these tools, as well as technical experts and responders, should be split up in the plan into national, regional, and international capabilities. Sensitivity mapping, as you'll see from my presentation, plays a crucial role within the plan, clearly showing different shoreline types in environmentally and economically sensitive areas. The maps most commonly use Geographical Information Systems, or GIS, which is software that allows the user to analyze, edit, and create maps quickly and easily, with many platforms now widely available online, with some as a free resource, such as QGIS. These sensitivity maps can be used to prioritize areas of importance, identify what shoreline types have been affected, and allow the user to undertake appropriate cleanup operations in these areas. The idea of prioritization is key, as if resources are limited, they'll need to be mobilized to the most sensitive of areas. Also, what needs to be taken into account is the time of year. Needs to be taken into account. For instance, a popular tourist beach will be a higher priority in the summer than the winter. On the right-hand side is a map that ITOPF created using GIS software that shows marine turtle breeding sites, areas of mangrove, and relevant local protected areas. So that sort of gives you an indication of what should be included. So access to shores, this is a prime example of practical aspects that can really affect the efficacy of a NOSCP. as access to shore is essential for machinery, responders and contractors to do their jobs in the affected areas. This is the reason why accessibility should be included in sensitivity mapping. Here you can see some examples, photographs of difficulties that have had to be overcome, such as accessing shorelines that have large oil debris, such as logs, which is commonplace in the Gulf of Guinea. Also, you can see cranes lifting machinery and responders creating temporary walkways for assessing affected areas. This creates an obvious difficulty for the cleanup response, but also has a health and safety risk for workers. Therefore, this needs to be taken into account during the planning phase to ensure these difficulties are overcome. Another factor when it comes to sensitivity mapping is shoreline type or substrate type, as these will influence what cleanup methods are used. For instance, rocky shores are difficult for machines to access, and therefore manual cleanup is primarily used. However, for sandy shores, as there are multiple access points for vehicles and machinery, both manual and mechanical recovery are used together. And then due to the nature of ports, obviously mechanical equipment is commonplace and usually present already. So these can be used for assistance with the cleanup. Now, mangrove habitats are an important shoreline habitat in Africa, with mangroves being found in 10 of the countries of West Africa. They're usually highly productive and biodiverse, soft sediment habitats that fulfill important functions such as coastal protection, things like conservation of biological diversity, provision of habitat and spawning grounds, and nutrients for a variety of fish and shellfish. For these reasons, they should be classified as a priority for protection in a contingency plan. They're much more difficult to clean due to the low bearing capacity of the soft sediment, making them unsuitable for machinery to be used. Also, what should be taken into account is that if a large response operation is mounted in these habitats, there is serious potential for the response to cause more damage than the oil due to things like trampling and disturbance to roots and young shoots. Additionally, fishing comprises a significant share of the coastal economy and the means of subsistence and income of coastal populations. So for these reasons, it would make sense for the NOSCP to prioritise fishing areas and nurseries in the sensitivity maps, as they're important economic resource. As I mentioned previously, no use zones for dispersants should be detailed in the annex so that dispersants aren't used near fisheries. Additionally, the criteria under which fishing restrictions would be imposed or lifted should be included in the plan, as this needs to be clearly stated so that there's no delay when it comes to this sort of economic resource. Now, for logistics, it's an important part of a contingency plan, and the information shown needs to be included within it. Logistic information such as marine assets available and relevant spill contractors will ensure that an appropriate response can be managed and the resource are readily available. And as previously mentioned, cooperation with the oil industry is important, as they may be providing a large amount of these resources potentially. Now, I'll briefly go through just a few different response strategies associated with different phases and the supporting information that should be included within the NOSCP. So for dispersant application, a list of permitted dispersants and the quantities available should be included, along with things like availability of vessels or planes to apply the dispersants, as well as the weather criteria and oil type suitable for efficient use. Again, these methods should be used alongside sensitivity maps so that if the oil is located near a no-use zone for dispersants, then dispersant use shouldn't be allowed. And then for in-situ burning, the type of oil and the availability of suitable equipment should be detailed. There are limitations to these methods, and these should be clearly identified in the plan to stop inefficient use. Again, similar information is required for containment and recovery at sea, such as oil types and weather conditions, and availability of resources. I mean, the top picture is what you'd prefer to see from your response compared to the photograph below. And again, limitations are present in this strategy, with the main one being The longer the time taken to mobilise, the less effective the containment and recovery due to spreading of the plume under sort of meteo-oceanic conditions such as wind and currents. And then shoreline protection is still in the emergency phase of the spill, where the boom deployment plans within the NOSCP are vital. Although ideal, it's unlikely that all resources at risk will be defended successfully, and therefore it's necessary to consider what areas should be prioritised for protection. Regular training and exercises are essential to practice this deployment, so that in the event of an incident, roles and responsibilities are understood and priority areas can be protected rapidly. Again, supporting information within the annex should include boom stockpile availability, condition and location, deployment plans, and weather conditions whereby boom deployment will be ineffective, such as high winds and strong currents. Just 5 steps of shoreline cleanup, with the first comprising surveys undertaken by air, sea or shore to identify the extent. This is followed by prioritization of sites, as we discussed, and then selection of cleanup techniques depending on the substrate type and access. And then relevant contact details should be included in the annexes. And then this is followed by physical execution of cleanup by the workers, with the last step comprising surveys to reassess the level of oiling and to terminate the cleanup once endpoints are met. This is just a sort of a simple matrices that should be included, just to give the reader a ability to quickly assess what cleanup methods should be used and which methods should not be used on specific shoreline types. I'm aware that you'll have a more detailed waste management and wildlife response webinar in the future, but it's worth just detailing the logistical information that should be provided in the annexes, such as what waste streams should be segregated, availability and location of licensed contractors, and map showing areas of potential intermediate storage and final disposal, which is provided in the bottom right-hand corner. And then wildlife response should be included, which typically comprises counting oiled corpses and live animals to undertake an impact assessment of the incident. And then some countries opt for different methods, such as euthanasia, whereas some go for rehabilitation and eventual release of the animal back into the environment. Contact details of vets and wildlife organisations should be included within this within the annexes. And then finally, as Lindsay said previously, training exercise is essential for effective NOSCP implementation, as practice makes perfect. Clear training and exercises timetables should be set out and developed, and include marine and shoreline response teams and interested parties. Regular and realistic exercises will just help to make sure that any contingency arrangements function properly and that roles and responsibility are understood. And it's also good for finding updated contact details of people, to make sure that there aren't any old contact details that have sort of crept into the plan. And finally, training is an iterative process. So following an exercise, there should be something like a debrief that should be held to discuss the triumphs and failures of the exercise and to ensure lessons are learned. And all involved need to be made aware of any subsequent changes, so that everyone's knows the current plan. And thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for this very comprehensive presentation on the annexes. I know that you already touched upon some topics that will be covered by further GI WACAF webinars, such as dispersant policy or waste management. So that's good to have a first overview, and the importance to have it in the NOSCP, and then we'll go a bit further into details in next webinars. Just now on Andrew's presentation, we have a quick poll that I will display. So again, it's just above the box where you type in your message that you can find the poll to answer. The question is, what following details should be included within the NOSCP's annexes? So there are 4 answers. two of them are correct, but unfortunately you can select only one answer, I think. So select the one you think is the most important. Yeah, I see some answers. So we have now first majority of answers on maps detailing shoreline sensitive areas and priorities for protection. Some other on contact detail for services such as modeling and technical advice. I will give just some more seconds for the participants to answer. Maybe, Andrew, you would like to comment or explain a little bit now that I think most of the participants have answered.
Yep, I'm just finding. Yep. Well done, everyone. The two answers that are correct are the ones that have been given. The incorrect one, so a list of ships scheduled to call at local ports each year. Obviously, this is impossible to get into a contingency plan, just because of the way that ships work. They could have an unscheduled stop, and therefore things like that aren't required. And then another sort of interesting one is the maps detailing the national parks. Obviously for marine NOSCPs, national then inland would be sort of less necessary, whereas if it's a marine and terrestrial NOSCP, then yes, areas that could be affected if a spill were to occur, such as national parks, would be included. But I know everyone's 86% has said that the sensitivity maps, so that's a good result. And then the 13% that said contact details, they're also correct.
Thank you very much. So I'll end the poll now. I'm happy to say that everybody answered correctly and followed the webinar. So now we move on to the Q&A session. So you can turn on your camera if you want, Lindsay and Andrew. First, we have a question from Theodore Kpeyi, which is, what shall be the timescale to update maps, sensitive maps, annexes to the NOSCP?
It's when it comes to updates, it should be constantly iterative. So if things change, then that should sort of be made. But usually, sort of every annually is just a good sort of time frame to work towards, to make sure that it's constantly in being changed. And when it comes to, I saw another question regarding exercises. Yeah, sort of it depends on how the exercises are, the extent of the exercise. If it's a small exercise, then more regularly, whereas if it's a larger national exercise, then it should be potentially sort of every 2 years or so, something like that. I can't hear you, sorry. You're muted, I think.
Sorry, you would like to, I'm muted. You would like to add something, Lindsay? Okay. Then another question is about the shoreline cleanup matrix. The question is, should it be established by the country and updated and annexed to the NOSCP, or is it a fixed document that you can just add to the NOSCP?
It's a fixed document that could be added, and it's rudimentary. So obviously different depending on access to the shorelines. Some responses might not be relevant, but it just gives you a general idea of what is the sort of the standard method of cleaning for instance, rocky shorelines. You're not going to be using low pressure flushing for a rocky shoreline. You'd be using that more on a mangrove. So it just gives you a quick, easy to see example of what method should be used.
Thank you. Then, yeah, we had a question about exercise, but you already answered that. Thank you. Then there is a question about the requirements or the demands that the training should have or tackle. Are there any, maybe the goals of the training? What are they, if they understand correctly the question?
Yeah, so it's just to ensure that everyone is aware of, if an incident were to happen, what their role is, what their remit is on site. So it's that's the sort of main option, to make sure that everyone knows that when an incident occurs, what do I do? Who do I need to contact? So it's updating contact details to make sure that the relevant people are made aware, as well as finding the roles and responsibilities. And then at the same time, it's actually the physical practicing deploying the boom, because boom deployment plans are fine to write and prepare, but actually until you get and do it sort of first person, and to see any difficulties that they have, that's also sort of an essential thing to do, and to make sure that the condition of the boom, for instance, if it's been stockpiled for 5-10 years, it might have degraded over time if it's not kept in a suitable environment. So it's to sort of prepare for that as well.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Lindsay, would you like to add something on that question? I think you're muted as well. We can't hear you.
One each. Yeah, I think Andrew spoke about maybe the practical exercises, equipment deployment, and it's also important that, of course, at all levels of the local, regional, and national level, the teams are trained. So that goes first by identifying and designating officially who will be in charge in case of a real spill, and those should be the person trained. And then there are general training.
Another one, interesting, which is, when shall we start shoreline cleanup following an oil spill? Is it after the removal of the ship or straight away? As per recent Mauritius, we were back to square one the following day. So I think this is concerning the Mauritius spill, but in general,
no,
you can answer that question.
That's a very good question. So, I mean, as soon as they're aware, the cleanup operations need to start as soon as possible. Obviously, with a constant, for instance, the WACAF spill with constant oil being released from the vessel, it obviously you clean an area and then the next day it's going to be oiled again. But if that area wasn't cleaned, then it would just be double the amount of oil that is there. So it needs to be, maybe the shoreline cleanup should start immediately, but areas, so once it's cleaned, maybe the area could be protected by a boom or something to sort of reduce the area getting impacted again. But to leave it until the ship's been removed, as we've seen from WACAF, it's taken a very long process. So that would have meant that the cleanup would have been protracted for a number of months. So it's sort of essential to get cracking as soon as possible, really.
Thank you very much for the answer. I think we have time for a last one, which is also very interesting. Thank you all for your questions. So for country without most of equipment needed for cleanup, how can that be managed and how do we prepare? So I think that's a crucial question for our country. Lindsay, you want to say a word?
Yes, that is a crucial question. Alors, there is a lot of focus usually on having equipment at a national level. Alors, for national authorities, maybe one of the most, or the prerequisite, or the most important thing is first to have a robust organization in place to manage the spill, to manage the mobilization of assistance, and to be able to maintain the leadership through the incident. After, it's also the responsibility of the authority to start at least trying to set up an inventory of what is available in the country and see what should be needed for the most probable types of spill, and try to start by balancing that to identify what type of equipment is really required. Then after, the industry the oil and gas industry is present in most, in quite a few WACAF countries. So there should be agreements also in place, and mechanism in place. If it's an incident from the industry, of course, the industry will mobilize their equipment. If it's an incident, from another source or from...
To add something, or if not, we'll wrap
no, that's fine. No, yeah, Lindsay answered well. And when it comes to just saying that prioritization is also a key factor when it comes to limited resources, because obviously you need to protect the resources that are most essential. And if you've only got a certain level of equipment, then you need to sort of take that into account. So that's the conversations that you should be having during the planning phase, to see which areas are essential to be protected, and which areas can maybe sacrificed by the lack of equipment.
Well, thank you very much all. Thank you very much, Lindsay and Andrew, for your presentation and for answering the questions, and for the participants to have answered the polls and ask so many questions. I hope this webinar was useful. The next one will be roughly in a month and a half. It will be on waste management. You can follow us on LinkedIn or find more information on our website. And in the meantime, I wish you all a nice week and end of the day. Thank you.